Excellent.
All right, I'm running out of room here. I'm gonna zoom out, readjust, and then zoom back in. Whoa, that's not in.
It's always interesting to me, like how an initial like simple flow can grow as we further clarify or fine tune solutions. That's pretty neat
Yeah.
to see the evolution.
So this is, well, let me finish off here. So we're going to set the thrust. So now we want to create our output. So here we were hard coding output. We don't want to do that this time. We worked really hard to not have hard coded output.
Agreed.
And it looks to me like we've only kind of introduced the idea of one new variable. V speed is actually one of these inputs that get initialized every turn. But thrust is new. And just because, as we talk about this, just an effort for clarity, if not for anyone else, just for me, setting that to be output thrust just sends that to be a clear message if I come back and take a look at this in another month.
That's fair. So then input thrust would be equal to power. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then also I can make this be input V speed, right? It might be obvious to some, it might not be to others, but this is now clear. Oh, this is an input value, right? And the way we name these variables can just help us when we're thinking through these problems. All right, so pretty sure this is wrong. The 0 is the direction, and I think we want to keep that. We want to stay in that 0 direction. But here, I think I'll leave it in the double quotes, even though, because we're just dealing with pseudocode. So we want to output 0 in our output thrust.
So I do have a question here.
Yeah.
So is there a reason, and I understand that the direction is part of the output and that it should not change for this episode, but do you want to still hard code it as 0, or do you want to output the actual variable value so that we can confirm that nothing is changing in direction? Is that a fair question? Or does that make sense?
So let me make sure I understand the question first.
Sure.
So you're saying we're going to get an input or a direction from the input, right? I'm pretty sure that's the case. The rotation, right?
Mhm.
We're going to get that as input. And so we could put in here input rotation. And then we could have output input rotation and output thrust instead of 0. So the question is, which of these is better? Which of these is more clear? Which of these is going to serve us better?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is. You've made my question a lot more eloquent.
Well, I've run into a situation where I've answered the wrong question many times, and I try not to, even though I still, I unfortunately many times do. So yeah, I think I am usually of the mind, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so if we have working code, I am usually loath to change it. And the only reason I would change it would, again, be going back to some of those clean coding principles that we saw or that I referred to in Bob Martin's book, Clean Code. And there's also some approaches, behavior-driven development and test-driven development, where you purposefully write code that just works. And then you go back and refactor if necessary. So
Okay.
in this case, I don't know. I think I would probably either put in 0, which was there to begin with, meaning not change it. I don't think I would put in the input rotation. I think if I were to do what you were saying, I would probably add a step in here that says output rotation equals input rotation. And I would set myself up that way. And then I could put in output rotation here, because I don't believe in general I want the rotation to be what the input was. I think in general, I want to set the output rotation to be what I want it to be. And in this particular place, it happens to be the input rotation.
Okay. I appreciate that.
But
That's
you certainly wouldn't be wrong if you put in the input rotation, right? The code would work, I think.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if it's 0, it's and we're not changing it, it'd still be 0. So it's interesting to me because I'm always looking for a model. And then I always want anytime I change a value for the model to update appropriately and not look for anything that's hard coded. So I'm coming, of course, from a different perspective. But the logic that you outlined here made a lot of sense, and especially the distinction between the input and the output. So, but it's all 0, so it makes it a lot easier just to keep it at 0, like you said.
I like obvious mistakes.
Mhm.
And so if I had output the input thrust or the input rotation and the output thrust versus 0 in the output thrust, if I ran into a bug, let's say later on down the road, like you said, and I'm changing the rotation, I think it would be more obvious to me if I see, oh, I'm always setting the rotation to be 0, as opposed to something with the word rotation in it. Because I think my brain might say, oh yeah, I'm setting it to the rotation, as opposed to my brain picking up on, okay, I have 2 different rotations. I have an input and an output. And which one am I looking at here? And
I
so I like things to go down in flames and explode and red messages everywhere, because then I know there's a problem. When things silently work or silently don't work,
uh-huh.
that's more headache for me.
Completely fair. So when the lander explodes on impact, that's kind of a pretty good signal that
Clear failure.
I appreciate that. So
I think this works.